Hi, everyone. Today we're going to talk about introduction to traditional integration platforms. We're going to talk a little bit about the what and the why of integration platform, how you and what they are, why you would use them, and a little bit about the how. So with that, let me get into our talk. Um, a little bit about me. My name is Ali Rizwan from Seha Consulting. I've got 20 years of background in the data and integration domain. Built a number of enterprise data and integration solutions. Specifically, I got experience in the healthcare domain, and in particular, government and financial industries. And one of key certifications or a piece of information about me is I'm certified in the Epic healthcare EMR caboodle data model. So it's a solution on top of the Epic EMR and kind of where the data flows in the data warehouse, which I'm certified in. And a little bit about our services. We kind of provide services in kind of three main areas, kind of consulting services and data analytics, integration services, and staff augmentation for specific roles that cater to the data engineering and integration platforms. Um, so with that, we'll get into the agenda. In this particular talk, we're going to be talking about, we're going to start off with use cases, right? Like I mentioned, the why you would use an integration platform. We're going to talk about key capabilities that, different enterprise level organizations that are dealing with a myriad of different data scenarios and these particular use cases would need. We're going to talk about the components that would go into, like I said, the how in terms of the components that help you build those capabilities and kind of satisfy those capabilities, and how that leads into kind of the application integration piece and data integration piece of using an integration platform, right? So use cases, right? So when we think about use cases, as we go through this, um, we're talking about certain use cases that we'll kind of refer back to in this case, around point of sales. So when we think of point of sales, these are things that like a big retailer, for example, is using. They've got different retail organizations throughout the country or the world. Each one of those locations is generating data, and you need to kind of you're not sending data at every transaction, obviously, that you process. But at the end of the day, you send your data to the kind of a final location that kind of reconciles the data from the different point of sales systems, right? And similarly, in telecom data, you have call data reconciliation. That's similar reconciliation process that happens in e-commerce when you're placing an order at a given e-commerce site. You place an order, and then that site needs to send you a confirmation. There's some integration capabilities involved in that transaction as well. Another key one is online banking. So think of different organizations such as like Plaid or other applications that kind of connect to your banking data, for example, with Chase. And they can kind of connect to that data and then pull that data into those applications, using integration capabilities to kind of give you certain details. For example, your spending habits, for example, right? So there is a component of integration capabilities involved there. In healthcare, which is a domain that I have kind of a lot of experience with, you have a number of scenarios where healthcare organizations that have, the partner organizations that are offering services that a certain healthcare system might not offer. For example, certain specialties you might refer patients to an outside provider. You want to send your data about your patient and their medical history, to that organization. So in that case, you want to give kind of a coordinated patient care across their care, right? So you want to make sure the data is present that you have about that patient's, healthcare and their medical history to the organization where you're referring patients, right? So as we think through some of these use cases, we'll talk about integration, capabilities that need to be there to kind of fulfill these, right? So with that, there's certain capabilities that are very critical, right? So in all these cases, we're talking about integration of data with internal folks within your organization, right? Like end of day reconciliation of the point of sales, right? That's probably a client store is sending data to a kind of a main data kind of recipient to kind of say, hey, how much sales did I have, for today's data? That in other cases with the online banking example, you're sharing data with an external vendor, an external application that's giving you further services and kind of a rich user experience with your financial data. Either way, you have to have the capability to integrate data from internal partners and external partners. So that's a very key kind of component, right? Key capability. Um, Likewise, in all these cases, you've got a bunch of different file formats, right? Like if you have a background in the IT space and you know that every organization, even within an organization and definitely outside the organization, there's a number of systems that are involved. Each, and obviously a number of use cases where you have to share data as well, and each of them have their own formats that are involved. In healthcare, for example, EDI and HL7, it's heavily used, right? So you need capability to process those transactions when you're making API calls. It's different standards that are used, different formats. You need it to be able to handle all those data formats, both for incoming and outgoing data processing. Likewise, you need to be able to transform and enrich the data, right? So if you've got data coming from an EDI transaction, and the final ending spot is SAP, that the formats are different, right? You need to do some transformations to get the data into that format. Likewise, with uh, another example with HL7 going into Epic, Epic stores data in a different format, and you need to do some transformations there. So, and as well as enrichment. And by enrichment, what we really mean is you basically, if you have a code coming in, right, like a code 1, 2, 3, one might mean like one type of service, like a surgery service. Two might mean something else. Three might mean something else. That enrichment happens before, as part of the data processing, before the data kind of ends up in its kind of final destination. As it's being processed by the integration platform, that's kind of what we mean by enrichment. Obviously, you need to be able to monitor and manage the transactions as they're coming through. There's capabilities that go along with that. So number 5, support sync and asynchronous processes. So that basically means, for example, with synchronous transactions, in some cases you need a confirmation immediately after you kind of process a transaction. That, for example, with an order confirmation, right? You place an order, you need a kind of a confirmation that, hey, my order was processed, right? So immediately as you do a transaction, you want a response back, as opposed to that's what we mean by synchronous, right? There's an immediate kind of feedback loop there. With asynchronous processes, you need in some scenarios, you don't need synchronous kind of that feedback loop. You have asynchronous processes that the platform and integration platform needs to be able to handle, right? Obviously, you've got data now in a bunch of different places. Before, these were mainly all on-prem kind of data sources you were connected to. Everybody had their own data center that they were running. Everything was on-prem. Now you've got data in the cloud as well that you need to be able to connect to. As far as support for different protocols with HTTP and FTP, obviously HTTPS, for example, it's mainly used for kind of single transactions, that like transaction based processing, and there's the S in the parentheses there's for security, right? So, for example, if you go to Uber, Uber sends you information about, hey, this is the driver that's coming to pick you up. You don't just rely on the person who's coming to pick you up to tell you. There's some information you get in the app. Likewise, the S there stands for HTTPS, which is there's certain certifications and a certificate that is exchanged in the background that's confirming who the identities is of the parties that are sharing data, right? So the protocols involved here kind of are driven by your kind of security and the nature of your exchange and the use cases involved and what type of protocol you're going to use. Because as I mentioned, HTTP it's more transactional. And, FTP, SFTP, you do more batch file transfer is typically what those protocols are used for. So these are with these capabilities. I'll kind of jump into the components, right? The components and what a traditional integration platform is allowing you to do. So if you look at the top section here, these are traditional things pretty much every integration platform needs, right? You need high availability, right? Which is what the top section is really kind of highlighting. For example, if you have you need the ability to have multiple nodes, so that if you've got a lot of traffic on one node, you have the ability to kind of switch over to a secondary node. If one node goes down, you got a secondary node there as well, right? These are kind of traditional kind of high availability scenarios that an integration platform needs to have. Likewise, if you've got disaster recovery, in this case, we say that, hey, you've got let's say your data center operates in Chicago, and there's a snowstorm of some type that kind of renders your data center inaccessible. You need to have some capability to have a disaster recovery capability that lets your organization still keep up and running, that you would need to set up in that scenario, right? So that's what the top piece is, highlighting that that pretty much every application needs to have. Now, from an integration platform, we kind of dive a little bit deeper here, right? We kind of, this little box, we're kind of breaking into multiple components that need to be there for an integration platform to function and kind of meet those capability needs, right? So I listed those components out here, but basically it's your API management and a management portal. So with the example of a banking system that has an API for third-party apps to be able to connect to see your financial data, right? A bank like Chase probably has many APIs, right, that they're managing. When you talk about an API portal, you want to give your users that are going to be consuming the APIs, both internal or external, right? And the example we gave was an external application we're connecting, but it could be for internal as well. That gives you a catalog of all your APIs that are available, right? And also you want the ability you want the ability to have the documentation as well, have the APIs in one place, that have some documentation there as well for your users to be able to kind of get information about the APIs that you have, right? And also it kind of contributes to giving like a consistent user experience when they're trying to access your APIs. From an API management component perspective, this is where your actual API kind of calls are happening. This is handling your API calls. So you might have different versions of an API, and as you're going through, you may have many types of APIs, and you may even have different versions of an API, right? So within a version, for example, if you roll out a new version, you're not too sure how robust it is. You could kind of limit traffic to that version versus kind of bulk of the traffic to go to an older version of the API, as an example, right? You have the API management capability to kind of let you deal with that. And obviously there's certain different type of transactions we mentioned. The API typically is a transaction-based processing, right? So you get a certain amount of transactions at a certain amount of hits at a time, right? For you to kind of then obtain the data. Now, and the format is typically XML, JSON. If you switch over to the B2B, B2B, if you look at the healthcare example, right? Like, let's say you have referral data going on, right? Like, I'm an organization, I'm sending a referral to another organization for certain services. I could have a referral data sent as an EDI, HL7 format, as soon as a referral is triggered, right? As soon as I get a referral, that I want to send out, I trigger that. Or I could send it batch so that like the end of the day, right? I'm sending referrals at the end of the day for some future time, right? The B2B capabilities is really able to is handling data in those formats like EDI, which are file based, but it could be both. It could be both, transaction or batch, as we mentioned. Then you've got data and CSV files, and which is in MFT, managed file transfer is the name of the component. This component is primarily batch, and when we talk about that end of day reconciliation use case, right, where you're kind of taking all the data that happens in a given store location, and you compiling that into a CSV file or a text file, and you're sending that over. That's typically when we're using the MFT capability, managed file transfer. Now, if you notice the top kind of three boxes that are API management, B2B, MFT, these are mainly configurations you do. But as we gave the example, right, like you may have data transformation, data enrichment that's happening as well, right, where you have to convert, let's say, an EDI to a transaction to kind of fit into your, SAP, right, like an ERP system or a Salesforce CRM system or a healthcare, like an Epic system, which is like an object-oriented database. That capability is handled here, right? This is where kind of bulk of the coding and the development happens to kind of take the data that's incoming or data that you need to kind of send out and transform it and kind of add the enrichment to before either you're sending it out or you're receiving it, right? And pretty much with these components, the final kind of stage there we mentioned, the data ends up, in a you have to process basically either integrated to an application, right? So like we mentioned with SAP, data comes in an EDI format. The SAP format is different, so you have to kind of take that data and transform it into a format where it appears natively in SAP or natively in Epic, for example, right? That's what we call application integration. Then also, there obviously there's data transformation and enrichment happening there as well. Or your data could just be be living in it may not need to be integrated to an application. It may just need to go to a data lake or some operational data store that is going to be used downstream by other applications, right? So the end of day reconciliation data, it may not need to go into an application like the referral record. Like a referral record, the doctor on the other side needs to see, in the Epic system to see, hey, this is the referral, this is the patient chart, this is the referral I'm processing. The end of day reconciliation is probably going to go into some data lake, which is going to be kind of processed later on in a nightly job to kind of perform that reconciliation. So, with that, like these are kind of the key capabilities and kind of core components of an integration platform. It's really like if you think about integration, data integration, it's really like the lifeblood of the economy, right? Like not every organization has all the data that they need. Any business needs data and needs interaction with other businesses or other departments even within a large organization. So integration platform, really are giving you that capability. And in future talk, we're going to go into deeper into each of these components. We've kind of touched very high level on each of these components, but when you're kind of scaling these out at enterprise level, there's a lot of considerations that go into, setting up an, API portal and API management, this API management component or a B2B component or MFT. We're going to talk a little bit more in detail into those talks. So this is more an intro, and then later on we're going to go deeper into the how of some of these components. So with that, I appreciate your guys' time and and look forward to speaking again. Thank you.